Hello, my name is Dan Long. I am the Dean of Students here at the College for Creative Studies, and today I'm going to provide an overview of ADA accommodations at the College for Creative Studies, some key differences between K through 12 accommodations and higher education accommodations, as well as our general process, an overview of the steps you'd have to go through, and my contact information will be found at the end of this presentation for any follow-up questions that you might have or to schedule an appointment. So accommodations may include a number of different types of disabilities. CCS provides accommodations for all students that have documented disabilities that significantly impact daily activities. Those disabilities could include physical, mental, or emotional disabilities, as well as learning disabilities. Students may have one or more types of disabilities, and all of the disabilities are handled on an individual basis. I've provided some basic examples here. This list is certainly not an exhaustive list. Disabilities range dramatically in the scope and severity of those disabilities, so it's a very individualized process. Some key differences between the K through 12 educational system in accommodating disabilities in higher education. In the K through 12 system, the goal is to ensure success for students throughout that process. All the systems are set in place to ensure that students are able to successfully navigate the curriculum, pass the courses, graduate from high school ultimately is the goal. Higher education, we ensure access. We ensure that all students have the equal ability to participate fully in the educational experience of the institution. In the K through 12 setting, there is an annual review process for accommodations that is generally conducted with at least the school caseworker, the student, and the legal guardians of the individual student. In the higher education setting, we do a one-time intake. The paperwork is provided to me. We schedule some meetings to discuss your accommodations requests, the accommodations that you're going to be granted and utilizing during your time at CCS. And from that point, there is no additional follow-up needed from the student to continue with their accommodations. The exception to that rule is going to be if a student experiences a new form of disability or feels that their accommodations are inadequate, and then we would have a follow-up meeting to discuss what changes should be made. In the K through 12 setting, it is based in mutual goal setting. Students as well as parents and the school personnel will go through exercises to set mutual learning objectives and goals for the student during their time in the school system. In higher education, we're really rooted in self-advocacy. Students are afforded the accommodations to provide equal access to educational experiences here at the college, but it is rooted in the student being a strong self-advocate, asking for the accommodations that they need, and then ultimately utilizing the accommodations as they see fit. K through 12, again, there's regular guidance. School caseworkers often will meet regularly with the students in the accommodations process. The teachers are much more hands-on in administering those accommodations and ensuring that the student uses them. In the higher education setting, it goes back to that self-advocacy. Students really are asked to ask us when they need guidance, to reach out for support when they need it. The really great thing about CCS is that there is a lot of support available to students, but it is rooted in the student initiating that interaction. K through 12, again, it's very administratively driven. There's a lot of work done on behalf of the student, a lot of work done in conjunction with the student. Higher education is very student driven. That's kind of been a reoccurring theme here in the differences between the K through 12 system and the higher education system is our entire process is very student driven. Everything from initiating accommodations to providing the documentation to determining what accommodations are, and ultimately the continuation of accommodations are all done at the discretion of the individual student. To initiate accommodations, the student must first disclose their need for those accommodations. The previous case files from either K through 12 educational system or from a previously attended higher education institution will not automatically follow a student to CCS and be automatically put in place. A student will have to reach out to myself directly to initiate the accommodations process, provide that documentation, and ultimately do a follow-up meeting to discuss what accommodations are needed. There will be medical documentation required to substantiate the disability and the impact on daily life. And accommodations cannot be established on behalf of the student. This is a key difference, again, between the K through 12 system and the higher education system. While we welcome family involvement, ultimately it is up to the decision of the student to establish those accommodations and utilize them while they're on campus. I did want to take a quick moment here to show you where the documentation requirements are found on our homepage. If you go to the student resources section, there is a link for students with disabilities. On this page, there is an overview of the entire disabilities process, how you request accommodations, and what the scope of those accommodations can be. About halfway down on this page, there's a link for the disability verification form. I'll open that for you. This is meant to be an exhaustive document. This document is intended to be completed by a medical provider. It includes a section for the student information, but then the rest of this form is to be filled out by either a treating doctor, psychologist, mental health clinician, whoever you work with typically for your medical care. Within this form, we attempted to provide documentation spots for any type of disability that a student may be experiencing. One of the common questions that I get is that if a doctor has to fill out every part of this form, and the answer is no. Within this document, you may have many things in here that have no bearing on your personal situation. Your doctor would not have to fill out all of these various pieces. They would only complete the sections that specifically refer to your disability and the symptoms that impact your daily life. As you can see, this form is very long. We do want to be upfront with students as they take this to their medical provider that, again, not all of this needs to be completed. The most critical pieces are going to be in this final section here, the big blank box. This is where you would ask your medical provider to complete to write out how your disability impacts your daily living, what sort of symptoms affect your academic learning, and your ability to access educational programs. Ideally, the medical provider will complete this section with a comprehensive list of symptoms and diagnoses that affect your ability to engage with our educational system, and recommended accommodations from their perspective as the medical provider on what would mitigate those symptoms and provide equal access to our educational environment. Questions about this form can certainly be directed to me. I'm also happy to communicate directly with your medical provider if they have questions about how they should be filling this form out. As a note on privacy, ADA records are considered extremely private. All records related to ADA accommodations should be sent directly to the Dean of Students, preferably either through mail or email. Fax is available, but we would prefer that it comes either in standard mail or through an email directly to myself. All records related to ADA accommodations are held in strict confidence. When accommodations are communicated to the appropriate faculty and staff on campus, no medical information is shared with anyone on campus without direct instruction from the student to do so. A typical accommodations email will likely include simply your name and what accommodations are being provided to you in the classroom. We do not provide any medical information, diagnoses, symptoms, unless you specifically ask me to do so. A hypothetical example of a reason we might do that is that if you are a diabetic and you want to provide specific instructions to your faculty in the classroom of what to do if you have a diabetic episode in the classroom. We try to do this in a very limited, on a very limited basis. The faculty in the classroom are meant to provide purely the accommodations. They're not meant to know more about your medical history than they need to know. If you feel like you have a situation that should require additional medical information being provided to your faculty or appropriate staff, we'll have a one-on-one conversation about why and what you would like shared with those people. And I'll provide you with a draft of an email that I would send to those appropriate employees of CCS for your review prior to sending it out to the faculty or staff that are relevant. All of our ADA records are kept in secure locked cabinets on campus or through secure electronic records. We hold these records as very private and very confidential, as we know that is your expectation of us. The basic overview for requesting accommodations. Step one is to contact myself, the Dean of Students, to request those accommodations. Either email or phone call is fine. Either one will work. From that point, you would submit either a disability verification form, which we found on the website, or your individualized education plan from the K through 12 education system, provided it was completed within the last 2 years. 504 plans may be acceptable. They often don't provide the necessary information. So if you do have a 504 plan, I would encourage you to reach out to me and discuss your 504 plan and provide me with a copy. If it provides enough information for me to put in place accommodations for CCS, that's all you'll need to submit. If your 504 plan does not include enough information for us to substantiate your disabilities and provide accommodations on campus, I'll discuss with you what additional documentation would be needed. Once the documentation is provided to myself, we will schedule a one-on-one meeting to discuss that medical documentation, your overall concerns about transitioning to CCS, questions about the learning process and the academic environment at CCS, and what accommodations you are looking for to be provided to you during your time at CCS. Once accommodations have been established, we will mutually agree on what those accommodations are. Necessary faculty and staff will be notified of those accommodations. Typically for most of our accommodations, that will include only faculty in the classes that you are currently enrolled in. Approximately a week before classes begin, I will send a notification to all of the various faculty that have students with accommodations in their classes, an email that indicates that you are in their class and that you have the following accommodations. Again, no medical documentation or information will be provided to faculty or staff at this time. It's purely a list of what accommodations you are to receive in the educational environment. If any of your accommodations require additional instruction from myself, as an example, an alternative testing site, at the time of our one-on-one meeting and establishing your accommodations, I'll provide you with instructions on how to access those accommodations. It's important to note that retroactive accommodations are not possible. We are not able to provide extra time on a test, as an example, for a test that has already occurred. It is better to set up an accommodation set at the start of your time at CCS and never choose to use them than to wait to ask for help until it's too late. I encourage all incoming students to disclose their need for potential accommodations to me as soon as they're able to, so that we can establish those accommodations and discuss your needs and desires for utilizing those accommodations at CCS. Once accommodations are put in place, no additional documentation will be necessary to maintain those accommodations. Once we've established what they are, each semester I'll be sending out the same list of accommodations to all of your new faculty for the classes you're enrolled in each subsequent semester. If for some reason an additional accommodation is required or a new disability emerges, additional documentation may be required for those situations, but I would reach out to me prior to soliciting any documentation from your medical provider to discuss what your needs are and if I do need additional documentation from you. If at any point a student would like to stop the accommodations process, that is entirely their choice. What would be required at that point is simply an email from the student to myself directly saying that in upcoming semesters they would no longer like to receive their ADA accommodation notices sent to their faculty. This would need to occur at least 1 week prior to the start of the semester to ensure that they're not sent out without you wanting them to be sent out. During this time period, if you have decided to stop notifying your faculty of accommodations on campus, I will temporarily close your file. I will keep it locked and stored away in case that you want to restart them at any point. If you choose to stop your accommodations in a given semester, and then a number of semesters later choose to resume using your accommodations on campus, you wouldn't have to provide any additional documentation other than just an email to me saying I'd like to reopen my accommodations file and I'd like to start receiving my accommodations again on campus. Records for accommodations are kept until the student graduates, should they choose to start and stop their accommodations at any point. Once a student graduates, for 1 year, we keep their accommodations on file in case the student would like a copy of those records or they re-enroll for a post-baccalaureate program, something along those lines. Then we would be able to reopen that file for them. After a year from graduation, those ADA records are destroyed and eliminated from our system. So if you were to re-enroll post-graduation more than a year after your graduation date, you would have to resubmit documentation to restart accommodations. Service animals and emotional support animals are permitted on campus. Service animals are permitted in all campus facilities, including the academic spaces as well as the residential spaces. Service animals are trained to provide a specific service related to a medical disability that has an impact on daily life. We do not require any medical documentation to utilize a service animal on campus. I do ask that if a student is going to utilize a service animal on campus, that they notify me ahead of time simply so that I can notify our campus safety and relevant staff on campus that the animal is allowed on campus and is permitted under ADA law. This just clears up any confusion for our campus safety staff in general, as animals that are not service animals are not permitted in the academic spaces. Emotional support animals are permitted within campus housing, but not on any other campus facilities. The process for requesting an emotional support animal is found through our housing portion of our website and requires a prescription for the ESA from the student's medical provider. That information can be found on our, again, through our college website. If you go to student resources, the on-campus housing tab, about halfway down that page, there is a link to the emotional support animal frequently asked questions, as well as the emotional support animal policy. Within the emotional support animal policy, there is full instructions on the approval process, what individual documentation is required for an ESA within the student housing system, and instructions on how to submit that. All ESA's requests are conducted through our Director of Residence Life, and any questions that you have about the ESA process should be directed directly to the Housing Department. As for parental involvement in ADA accommodations in the higher education setting, we do welcome parents to be and family members to be present during the accommodations intake and setup process. Oftentimes, parents are able to help us work through what has worked well for a student in the past and help the student articulate what concerns they may have for the future. The goal for our academic accommodations process is to build students greater self-advocacy through their time at CCS. Each student starts with a different level of ability to self-advocate, and we want to work with students where they're at when they start at CCS. As their self-advocacy skills increases, family and parent involvement can decrease and provide the student with a greater sense of autonomy in their accommodations process and their learning at CCS. Ultimately, though, the student does drive their accommodations process. Establishing, utilizing, and continuing to keep accommodations in place are all controlled by the student. And as I had mentioned previously, we cannot set up accommodations on behalf of the student. The student does specifically have to request and utilize those accommodations while they're here at CCS. I hope that's provided you a basic understanding of the accommodations process here at CCS and how things are managed. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at me. I've provided my mailing address, my phone number, and my email here. And I hope to see you as soon as you start at CCS, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.